Your brother's going to die today and there's nothing you can do about it." That's what Karen's smile said as she watched my disabled brother's oxygen levels drop while 3 cement trucks blocked our medical access ramp. She didn't know I was already on the phone with my sister, the FBI director, who was 10 minutes away. When Karen shoved my 65-year-old father to the ground for begging the trucks to move, she sealed her fate. Now she's facing federal prison, but how did one HOA president's vendetta against a disabled man expose corruption throughout our entire county? If you've ever dealt with a power-hungry HOA, you need to hear what happened next. Subscribe for more stories of justice served. The morning had started like any other. Dad sipping coffee on our porch, enjoying the spring air. My brother Jason was upstairs, dependent on his breathing machine after a spinal cord injury that left him paralyzed. We'd moved back to our childhood home specifically because it could be modified for his wheelchair. The doctors warned us that without immediate medical access during his breathing episodes, Jason could die within minutes. We'd renovated everything: wider doorways, accessible bathroom, and most importantly, that gentle, sloping medical access ramp that allowed ambulances to reach him during breathing emergencies. We'd had 3 terrifying episodes in 4 months where seconds mattered. Dad looked up from his newspaper, frowning. "That's strange," he muttered. "Nobody's doing construction around here." I joined Dad at the railing, watching as 3 massive yellow cement trucks lumbered toward our house. They slowed, then stopped, completely blocking our driveway and the medical access path. That's when I spotted her, Karen Mitchell, HOA president extraordinaire, in her crisp white pantsuit and perfectly highlighted blonde hair, marching up our lawn like she owned it. "Good morning," she chirped with fake cheerfulness that never reached her eyes. "Just wanted to inform you the HOA is doing some necessary road work today. We'll need these trucks here for about—" She paused, checking her diamond-studded watch. "Oh, about 8 hours or so." Dad set down his coffee cup slowly. "Karen, we can't have these trucks here. Jason has a medical condition. The ambulance needs clear access to our ramp at all times. You know this." Karen's smile tightened. "Rules are rules, Mike. We sent notices last week about this temporary inconvenience." That was a complete lie. We'd received nothing, but Dad kept his cool. "My son has a serious medical condition. These trucks need to move now." Karen's eyes narrowed as she tapped on her tablet. "Speaking of rules, your medical ramp was never properly approved by the architectural committee. That's actually why I'm here. We'll need to discuss its immediate removal." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The ramp that literally keeps my brother alive, the one we submitted paperwork for 3 times. Karen waved her hand dismissively. "Paperwork gets lost, unfortunately, but we have strict appearance guidelines in Willow Creek Estates. This is a luxury community, not a hospital zone." This wasn't the first time we'd clashed with Karen. Last month, she'd cited us for the wheelchair lift on our porch, an unauthorized structure. Before that, it was the wider parking space we'd created for Jason's accessible van. Improper use of driveway area. Each time, we'd submitted the proper paperwork. Each time, it mysteriously disappeared from HOA records. Our neighbors, the Rodriguezes, warned us when we moved in. Karen targeted the Williams family after their daughter got cancer, Mrs. Rodriguez had whispered. Medical equipment in the house meant commercial activity, according to her. They finally moved after the stress became too much. We'd seen Karen's tactics firsthand at community meetings, always citing rules, always claiming paperwork issues, always targeting the most vulnerable residents. The elderly couple with the ramp, the veteran with PTSD and his service dog, the family with the autistic child who needed special safety fencing. Last week, I discovered a disturbing pattern while reviewing county records. Every home Karen had targeted eventually sold well below market value to shell companies that traced back to board members' relatives. 5 properties in 3 years, all previously owned by residents with disabilities or medical needs. When I'd brought this up at the last HOA meeting, Karen had cut me off. "We're not discussing conspiracy theories at official meetings," she'd said, banging her gavel. Later that night, we received our first official warning about the medical ramp, the same ramp they'd verbally approved months ago. Dad stepped off the porch, making his way toward the first cement truck, the driver looking uncomfortably between him and Karen. "I'm going to ask these drivers to move right now so we can maintain medical access. Then we can discuss your paperwork issues." Karen had connections everywhere. The building inspector was her brother-in-law. The county commissioner played golf with her husband. The local judge was her college roommate. Everyone knew appealing HOA decisions was pointless in our county. I could see Dad trying to reason with the truck driver, who kept glancing nervously at Karen. I pulled out my phone, recording everything. The driver shrugged, pointing to his work orders that specifically showed our address as the designated parking location, not the empty lot 2 doors down where roadwork was actually planned. This was deliberate. This was targeted. This was Karen sending a message about who really controlled our neighborhood. I watched Dad's expression change from reasonable to desperate as the driver refused to move. "Please," I heard Dad say. "My son could die if an ambulance can't get through." The driver looked genuinely conflicted, but another glance at Karen, who was now making a slashing motion across her throat, seemed to settle the matter. Dad turned back toward Karen, his face flushed with a mixture of anger and fear I'd never seen before. "You're doing this on purpose," he said, his voice shaking. "This isn't about rules. This is about forcing us out." That's when Karen did something that would change everything. She physically stepped in front of my father, her manicured hands shoving him backward with surprising force. "You will not interfere with official HOA business," she snapped. My 65-year-old father lost his balance, falling hard onto our front lawn. I ran to help him up, his hands scraped and bleeding from breaking his fall. "Have you lost your mind?" I shouted at Karen, who stood over us, her face contorted with anger. "This is assault." Karen straightened her designer jacket. It was self-defense. He was threatening me and interfering with approved HOA operations. She nodded to a man taking photos from across the street. "My assistant captured everything. The trucks stay where they are. Your unauthorized ramp will be addressed by the board next week. Until then, consider this a temporary inconvenience." From inside the house, I heard the beeping of Jason's monitor. His oxygen levels were dropping. A morning episode was starting. My heart raced with panic. "We need an ambulance right now," I shouted, pulling out my phone. But Karen just smiled. That cold, calculating smile. "They'll have trouble getting through, won't they? Maybe next time you'll follow proper HOA protocols." She turned to walk away, as if she hadn't just potentially endangered someone's life. I helped Dad inside to check on Jason while frantically explaining the situation to the 911 dispatcher. They promised to send smaller emergency vehicles that could navigate around the trucks, but estimated at least 30 additional minutes before they could reach us. Dad pressed a towel against his bleeding hand, watching Jason's oxygen levels continue to drop on the monitor. "We can't wait that long," he said, his voice breaking. I didn't know what to do, so I called the one person who always knew how to handle impossible situations, my older sister Emily. I left a frantic voicemail explaining everything, never expecting what would happen next. Little did Karen know, my sister wasn't just any concerned family member. She was Special Agent Emily Thornton, Assistant Director of the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. And she was already on her way home for a surprise visit to see Jason. As Jason's breathing became more labored and the paramedics were still trying to navigate side streets to reach us, I watched helplessly out the window. Karen had set up a lawn chair near the cement trucks, scrolling through her phone, occasionally glancing toward our house with a satisfied expression. 20 minutes later, a black SUV with government plates screeched to a halt behind the cement trucks. My sister stepped out, still wearing her dark blue FBI windbreaker from an early morning operation, her badge gleaming in the sunlight. She didn't waste a second assessing the situation. "Federal agent, move these trucks immediately." Her voice carried the full weight of authority. The cement truck drivers practically fell over themselves following her orders. Karen, who had been smugly supervising from her lawn chair, ran over, her face red with indignation. "You can't do this. Who do you think you are?" Emily didn't even look at her as she flashed her credentials. "FBI Assistant Director Thornton, and you are currently impeding emergency medical access, which is a federal offense under multiple statutes." She pulled out her phone. "I'm also calling for backup to document what appears to be a clear case of reckless endangerment and potential civil rights violations concerning disabled access." Karen's face went from angry red to ghost white in seconds. "This is a private HOA matter. This is harassment." Emily cut her off. "Shove my father again, and you'll see what harassment really looks like. Right now, I'm focused on saving my brother's life, but I promise we'll continue this conversation at your arraignment." As the trucks moved, emergency vehicles finally reached Jason. His oxygen levels had dropped dangerously low, but the paramedics were able to stabilize him. Emily stayed with Karen, ensuring she didn't leave while making calls that would change our community forever. What we didn't know then was that Emily's team had already been investigating corruption in several HOAs across the state, and Karen had just handed them their perfect test case. The next morning, I sat in our kitchen numbed by everything that had happened. Jason was still at the hospital but stable. Mom stayed with him while Dad processed his police report about Karen's assault. Emily sat across from me, her laptop open, files spread across the table. "This isn't just about one incident," she said, her voice now in full professional mode. "Karen's HOA has been on our radar for months. We've been building a case about financial corruption and discriminatory practices against disabled residents across several communities." I blinked in surprise. "You were already investigating her?" Emily nodded. "We received multiple complaints about disabled residents being targeted with impossible compliance demands, medical access being restricted, suspicious financial dealings with contractors, the works. Karen's company manages 7 different HOAs, all with similar complaints. We just needed clear evidence of action that crossed federal lines. What happened yesterday with Jason and Dad gave us probable cause for warrants." As if on cue, Emily's phone buzzed with messages. "They've just executed search warrants at Karen's home, office, and the HOA management company." She turned her laptop, showing me photos of documents being removed in boxes. I was still processing everything when our doorbell rang. Standing there was Amanda Torres, our elderly neighbor who used a wheelchair herself, her eyes wide with emotion. "I saw what happened yesterday with those cement trucks," she said, her voice trembling. "Karen did the same thing to me last year, blocked my ramp with landscaping equipment for 3 days. I missed my dialysis appointment. I wanted to speak up, but you were afraid." Emily finished for her. Amanda nodded, tears in her eyes. "She threatened to put a lien on my house if I complained. She said nobody would believe me." Emily handed Amanda her card. "We would believe you, and we need to hear your story." What happened next was something I never expected. Neighbors began arriving at our house all day, each with their own Karen stories. The Peterson family, whose child with cerebral palsy was denied a backyard therapy pool. Mr. Davis, who lost his leg in military service, fined repeatedly for his service dog. Mrs. Jenkins, threatened with eviction for installing a stair lift. Each story more shocking than the last. Emily and her team documented everything, setting up an impromptu community meeting in our living room. By evening, news vans had gathered outside as word spread about the FBI investigation. My phone rang. It was the hospital. Mom was frantic. There's a woman here trying to enter Jason's room, claiming she needs to inspect for HOA violations. Emily was already heading for the door. Hospital security has detained her. We'll handle this now, she called over her shoulder. Karen's desperation was reaching dangerous levels as her perfect HOA world crumbled around her. The next morning brought the first arrests, not just Karen, but the entire HOA board, 3 city officials, and a judge who had consistently ruled in their favor in property disputes. News helicopters circled overhead as agents removed boxes of evidence from Karen's perfectly maintained colonial home, the same home where she'd hosted HOA meetings to decide which neighbors to target next. Emily returned from the hospital looking exhausted but satisfied. "You need to see this," she said, spreading documents across our kitchen table. Financial records showing how Karen had embezzled over $2 million from HOA funds. Fraudulent contracts with companies owned by board members' family members. And most disturbing, a literal target list of disabled homeowners with notes about how to force them to sell their properties through harassment. When the handcuffed Karen was led from her house by FBI agents, cameras captured her stunned face as she saw the neighbors she'd terrorized standing together, watching in silence. The cement truck company owner came forward, revealing Karen had bribed him to specifically block our medical access, telling him it was just a neighborhood dispute that needed resolving. Jason came home that afternoon to a neighborhood transformed. People who had lived in fear for years were standing together on front lawns, sharing stories that had been kept silent for too long. "I never meant for all this to happen," Jason said, quietly, as we helped him back into his room. "You didn't cause this," Emily assured him. "Karen and her cronies did this through years of corruption and cruelty. You were just the final straw." Dad's hands were still bandaged from his fall when reporters asked for his comment. He simply said, "I just wanted my son to be able to breathe, that's all." That simple statement became the headline that rippled across national news. At the emergency community meeting that Emily helped organize, neighbors voted unanimously to dissolve the old HOA and create a new community association focused on accessibility and inclusion. The first order of business was creating a medical emergency access plan, ensuring no vehicle would ever block a medical ramp again. Karen's trial was set for spring, with federal prosecutors confident about their case. The cement trucks that once blocked our driveway had become symbols in our community's story of resistance. Yesterday, I watched Jason wheeling himself independently down the ramp that Karen had tried so hard to remove. Children waved to him from across the street, no longer taught to avoid the sick guy's house. Sometimes, Jason came home that afternoon to a neighborhood transformed. People who had lived in fear for years were standing together on front lawns, sharing stories that had been kept silent